Hi there, it's Chad here with Living the Dream Real Estate Group. And today on the program, we are going to be talking about our investments. No, we're not going to be talking about investing, but what we are going to be talking about is using the investments that we already have and how we can be using those towards real estate. So today we're going to be talking about things that first-time homebuyers can be doing to better themselves or prepare themselves for purchasing property. We're going to be talking about how people that are already in the real estate market already own homes, how they can be using that to build up equity or building up their portfolios with the equity that they have in their homes. We're going to be talking about downsizers and what they need to be considering when it comes to their home portion of their investments and how that can be working for them. We're going to be talking about the opposite end of the scale, how to work with our children or look towards our future when it comes to our children and what we can be doing to set them up for success when it comes to purchasing their homes. We're going to be talking about our investor groups, the people that are invested into maybe specifically real estate or into commodities or stocks, how we can find a balance in putting that all together. And we're also going to be just talking about how we can be using it for mortgage planning. So today it's a jam-packed session with Darcy Feth from Investors Group. He's been in the industry for years and has a tremendous amount of experience that he can lend towards what we have to talk about today. So let's jump into it. Hi, everyone. And with us today, we have Darcy Feth joining Scott and I as we talk about our financial health, especially when it comes to the most important thing that we have, our homes. And it's really interesting to see all the different dynamics. And over the last number of weeks, we've had mortgage planners, mortgage brokers that help us with understanding how we can best be working with our mortgages and all the things that come with that. But on the other side of our financial perspective is our finances that we have been hopefully saving and looking towards retirement and all that good stuff. But with that, there's a good portion of that we can be using towards our home. So we have Darcy with us today from IG Wealth, and he's been a certified financial planner for quite some time now. And with his experience, we're gonna dig into some questions. That sound good to you, Darcy?
Happy to be here. Thanks very much, Chad.
Right on. So, Darcy, when we are looking, especially with some of our clients, we just spoke to some people not long ago about their first home. First home purchasers are up against it all over the place. They got high interest rates to be considering. The down payments that they need are quite extraordinary. But when we're looking at folks that are trying to purchase their first home, what are some of the strategies and some of the things that they can be doing from RSP considerations, maybe first-time home savings, that kind of stuff? What can people be doing that can better set themselves up?
Yeah, so great question. Obviously, the FHSA, as we now refer to it, because we love our acronyms.
Yep.
So the FHSA was just introduced this year. And if you're watching this right now, important that if you are buying a home right away, that you set it up before December 31st, because you want to make sure that you've got that room. And so simply by setting it up, you get the room for 2023, and then, of course, new room in 2024. There is still the first-time home buyers plan, which is using money from your RSP. And so taking money from that, using that for your down payment, and then essentially you pay yourself back over a period of 15 years. Mm-hmm. And both of those strategies are great because they are tax deductible. And what that means is, for example, if you're earning about $80,000 a year, you've got a marginal tax rate of 28.2%. And what that means is for every $1,000 that you put into an RSP or FHSA, you're reducing your taxes by $282.
Mm. Okay.
Very, very good. I like the math. I'm a math guy, so I like how you led into that, and I have a really good understanding of what I need to do. So, Darcy, when we talk about, a lot of the times, Chad and I will go through that process of, okay, we found their first home, people are in it, they're starting to build some equity in that property. And one of the things that we get into a lot of conversations about is as they're moving through their life and things are changing and they're maybe looking at that next home, or how do they potentially use that equity in their home. Maybe talk a little bit about how they can grow their portfolio with that equity, or potentially take that and invest in other real estate and those types of things. What are some options that they might have out there?
Yeah, so using home equity, there's a couple of different uses for it, and one of the things that I'll always say is it's got to be for the right person first of all. So don't take on more risk than what you're going to feel comfortable with, and don't flip yourself upside down and suddenly put your home at risk. Those are really important, and any quality CFP will be stressing that before you execute any sort of strategy like that. Now, having said that, one of the things that you can do have is keep a home equity line of credit available. So that is using the equity inside of your home. You can set up what's called a home equity line of credit, and that is usually at very similar to a mortgage interest rate, which right now they're a little higher, but it's typically floating around prime or prime plus a half, sometimes as high as prime plus one. But when you've got that available, it's always available. And so, for example, if there is something like 2020 with COVID and the markets crashed 35% in a matter of 2 months, again, if you are a sort of a growth focused investor and you want to capitalize on something like that, you could take a portion of your home equity line of credit, go and put that into, I would use a non-registered account. I'll get to that in a second. But I would put that into a non-registered account, put it into investments. It grows back in the recovery time. COVID recovery time was very quick. It was 9 months, and suddenly it went from markets being down 30% to being up 20%. That doesn't happen very often, but if you've got that home equity line of credit available, you can do something like that, make the money off of it. And the reason why I said a non-registered account is that the interest is tax deductible then for that year or two that you're using that home equity line of credit. So now you've got a tax write-off as well.
Well, that's really good, and especially the HELOCs and just how important the home equity line of credits, how important those can be, and so integral to purchasing. We see it quite often when people can use those. That's really good. Now, one of the things, I mean, we've talked about first-time home buyers. What about some of the people that have been in their homes? We had some chatter with somebody just recently, and we're going to have them on the podcast soon about downsizing. So those people that have owned homes, let's say for numbers of years, so they're on the opposite end of the scale when it comes to home ownership, but now they've been into it for quite some time. So how do those our clients that are trying to downsize, how do they use those funds intelligently to strengthen their retirement? So now that they've been into the house for a long time, what kind of strategies or what can they be using now for the downsizing process?
Yeah, so with that, first of all, love the retirees, and a big part of what I do is protecting their wealth.
Yes.
That's incredibly important with retirees, is we want to protect them. And so depending on the type of investor that they are and what they've been using already, but sometimes they will have tax-free savings account room available. So right now you've got a lifetime amount of $88,000 in contributions. So if you've got a couple, that is $176,000 in lifetime contributions, and that there's another $7,000 coming in 2 weeks' time for each of them, because it went up to $7,000 of room for next year. So that's one thing, but that's probably going to be a small amount of what they're getting when they downsize. Number two is then you go into, again, a non-registered account. Non-registered simply means that it's not a TFSA, it's not an RSP, and you pay taxes on capital gains, dividends, and interest. And so something that I like using the inside of that, and a lot of financial institutions kind of miss this, is you can use a product. It's a certain type of portfolio which is called T-Series, and what they do is they set up an investment portfolio, and they do a monthly or annual payout of it, and it's largely a return of capital. The reason why that's so important is if you're retired, you don't want a lot of extra income coming into your household because A, you get taxed on it, but B, it also affects things like fair pharmacare. It could essentially affect other social programs that you may or may not qualify for, such as OAS clawback. So it's being aware of things like that. And so having a product where you have a return of capital simply has you invested, and it's a return of capital, and it can be set up for 5 or 6% of your investment, but largely it is tax deferred because all your growth is still staying inside of the investment.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Very, very interesting. It's interesting to see how many different options there are out there for retirees and for people that are downsizing. And, I think one of the things for somebody like Chad and I who have kids that are not out of the house yet, and who knows how long they're going to be in the house at this point in time. We'll see where that goes. But that's one of those other things that comes along with that downsizing and planning for that future is,
good point.
How do you set up your children in terms of getting into the real estate market and getting to that point? Because prices have obviously inflated so much since we got into the housing market, and even more so with our parents. And so what are some of the potential strategies? Like I've got a 10-year-old son and a 12-year-old daughter, and hoping to get them out of the house in the next 10 years, maybe. But what are some of the things that I could potentially do, Darcy, to start helping to set things up for them so that they can take advantage of those things as they get a little bit older and get into the housing market maybe a little bit earlier than some others could?
Yeah, so there are a number of different strategies that you can use. And so first of all, a little plug here is there is something called moneyandyouth.com. It is especially for teenagers and young adults. And it is all the things that they are not teaching you in school about money. So I will definitely recommend that right off the start. Definitely get your kids to look at that. IG created it in conjunction with a federal program. It's been around for about 25 years, and we try and get it into schools, but not all the schools are helping us out.
Sure.
Now back to the question though, is different strategies. So if you aren't maximizing out your TFSA, you could always use your TFSAs for your children's benefit down the road. Another strategy though, and this is sort of thinking outside the box, is you can also use RESPs. And here's why you use RESPs is you get that 20% max or match rather. So you're maxing that out. And when it comes down the road, that income comes back to the children to use for their schooling. Now, they might not choose to use it for their schooling, but they can still be in school and pull money out during that time.
Okay.
So the income goes against them. They've got the tax write-offs for it. They could then pull that money out, use that as a future down payment, or reinvest into TFSAs, stuff like that. You can also do what are called informal trusts, which just means you set up an account essentially in the name of the child. So you can do that. There's also formal trusts, a little more expensive, a little more complex. I don't think it's for everybody. So those are a couple of strategies. And then yet another, again, thinking outside the box, is if you've got young children, and especially when they're really young, is you can have a children's critical illness policy set up for them. Now, this is to protect against a severe injury. If they end up in Ronald McDonald House or something like that, you've got income to protect against that. So first of all, that's protecting the entire family from downside risk. The thing is, though, is when they turn 25, all the premiums that you paid into that get returned to you. So you've had this protection for those. Let's say you got it when they were born. you've had that protection for 25 years. They stayed healthy. Take all that out and go, thank you for staying healthy. Here's a down payment for your house.
Here's a home.
Almost.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit outside the box, but it's protecting the household during those years when you've got a young family, and it covers 25 different health conditions. So you've got that protection, but at the same time you get the return of premium, which means you get every dollar back, which is what I love.
Right.
That is really, really good. And, so many people aren't going to be thinking about that at all. That's a great idea, Darcy.
If there's 100 people listening right now, I would say 99.5 of them probably don't know. If there's 1,999 haven't heard of that strategy.
And especially with the critical illness portion that you talk about, because realistically it's creating that nice little savings program, but it's there for other reasons leading up to that point as well. And so there's that little double edge, or that double effect that you get out of that, which is fantastic. That's really cool.
It's safety for the family. Because let's face it, if your child gets ill, you are going to be by their side, and you're going to lose time from work. So first of all, there's that protection for them. But we would hope, 99% of the time that's never going to come up, and therefore you've got it available, and it's a forced savings, if you will, with the upside that if the worst happens, that you're not having to either go into your own RSPs or do a GoFundMe page, and not to criticize anyone who's ever done this, but having a barbecue in front of a Walmart or something.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. So we've talked about some of the families that are first-time purchasers. We've talked about families like myself and Scott that are getting started. We've talked about people downsizing. But there's another portion of the people that we talk to regularly, and those are some of our investors. And, we've got people that with what you're doing, that they can be fully entrenched into commodities or into stocks. But then on the other side, we have to there's some that are totally into real estate. So with some of our investor type people that are looking at, their investments and wanting to make sure that they've got a broad asset class when it comes to what they're investing into, what thoughts or what can you pass on to us with regards to making sure that people are balanced throughout the process?
Yeah. And this is a great question because real estate, obviously, especially in the Okanagan, is a great investment, and it's using it properly, but also realizing some of the I don't want to use the term challenge, but some of the uniqueness of using real estate, and so number one is you've got. If it's not your primary residence, of course, the entire capital gain gets triggered like that, right? So, so you have to be aware of that, and so something that I see people that they'll do is they'll be invested in a real estate property, and they'll still contribute to their RSPs on an annual basis. But if you know that you've got an investment property that you're going to be selling a couple years down the road, what's going to happen is you're going to have a very large capital gain for that year. And so you need to be aware of that. And so I might choose not to use my RSP room for a year or two, because my marginal tax rate right now might only be 30 or 35%.
Yeah.
But if you have a huge capital gain year, so you're selling your big white property or a place on the lake or something like that, you suddenly get bumped up into that 53% marginal tax rate. Well, that's where I want my RSP room. And so I would take some of those gains and use it in that year. And so you're getting, again, to use that $1,000 analogy, every $1,000 that you're putting in is now reducing your taxes by $530 whereas in a regular year, you might only be getting $300 on that.
Mm.
So it's being aware of that and planning for that. And that's where talking to your realtor and your financial planner can prepare you for stuff like that, because Chad and Scott, you're going to tell them, this is sort of the expectation of where we see the market going. Now, we don't have crystal balls, obviously, but
On back order.
right. So in a couple of years, here's what you might see as far as that house price being at, and then I look at it and I go, okay, so let's look at taxing opportunities or tax opportunities. And by the way, we might also look at stuff in there if they also carry non-registered investments, so stocks, for example, where they bought a really lousy stock a few years ago. This would be a good time to trigger that capital loss, which we can then use against the capital gains that they're making by selling the properties that you guys are working with them on. So planning that sort of stuff in advance really helps to take out the tax bite.
For sure. Thanks, sir.
Yeah, well, and it is, I think so many of us get caught. We get caught when it comes to tax time, or something happened and you need to pull it out quick, and there's not enough of that planning that goes along with it. So being able to use the experience that you guys have and that you bring to the table, Darcy, is a key component to that. And one of the things that Chad and I have talked a lot about and talk a lot about with our clients is this amazing network that we've been able to build with all of the professionals, not unlike yourself, and really being able to use that group to collaborate with is one of the things that is such a huge strength when it comes to our network, and knowing that we can lean on all of you. And one of the things that we talk a lot about is when we'll initially start to talk to a buyer, whether they're first time or they're going to the next stage of their market or whatever the case may be, a lot of the times it's, okay, so first questions are, have you met with your mortgage broker? What other planning have you done to lead up to that? So one of the things I wanted to get a bit more information for you, for our listeners, is where a financial planner obviously should come in early in the mixture, but how would you guys work with helping with that mortgage planning and being able to lead people in the right process, so that, again, we can work with you, leading them into the mortgage brokers that we work with, and then us, because really we come in a little bit after that step, although we're a part of the initials. So.
Yeah, and so that comes down to comprehensive financial planning, and that is looking at every aspect. And a big part of that is, so one of the 6 pillars is cash management. And so that is looking at what kind of debt are you currently carrying. I just came across one recently where they've got a lot of credit card debt, and they've got all this room on their home equity line of credit. I'm like, okay, there's an easy one. That's just a nice little beach ball that you've tossed up for me. But not having a whole ton of credit card debt when you've got other lower sources available. But we look at that, but we also look at what are your long-term goals. So where do you want to be in 15, 20 years, or even longer? So if you're a young investor, a young couple, and you're, say, 30, 35 years old, what does retirement look like, and where is that going to be? Because if you overcommit to a property, for example, and it harms you in the long run, well, that might be very, very impactful to your retirement. But if you're buying a large house right now and the plan is, well, at 60 or 65, we would downsize, we can also work that into your financial plan. So both are available. And by the way, when you downsize, it's tax-free. So not necessarily a bad thing.
Ding.
So being aware of that and having that as part of the plan, because you're not just looking short-term, you're looking long-term. So we're looking at, what's your cash flow right now? How can we clean that up a bit and just give you better opportunities now? But also, how do we protect you as well? Because, and again, the insurance is a part of your financial plan. So having the proper life insurance, having proper disability insurance in place to protect against those mortgage payments if the absolute worst happens. And that's one of the parts that's often ignored as well, especially with young buyers, because Chad and I were both 20 years old at one point, and we thought we were made of iron, and we're not. And so we learned that as we get a little older. And so anyway, having that to protect as well. So being able to protect your payments while you're making the payments is also important. So don't just be aware of what the mortgage payment is going to be aware of what the protection is going to be there too, to protect your family in the long term.
Right. Well, and it is a big thing. It's not an easy thing to talk about, but it is. Unforeseen things unfortunately do happen, and we need to be prepared to deal with those. And being able to put those things in at an early state is the best thing you can possibly do, because then it's there and it becomes a part of the monthly output, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and I stress too, being properly insured. So being overinsured is almost as bad as being underinsured. So it's just dealing with a professional who's going to have the right products there for you. And I will say this as well, because we're going to have some first-time home buyers on here. Don't get the bank's mortgage insurance, because your mortgage starts off here, and over time your mortgage goes down, but your payment stays exactly the same. So your cost of insurance is going up. So get your own policy wherever you do it. Get your own policy, because you own it. As that mortgage comes down, the difference goes to your family.
Darcy, you've, in many of our conversations, and listeners, yes, I've been talking with Darcy for quite some time now, over the last year and a half, 2 years, and it is just so important to have people like Darcy in your corner that you say, this is what you say, protecting your investments and your wealth. And that's something that we're not always mindful of. And I just really appreciate your take on this today, especially when it comes to home purchasing, because right now, more than ever, our listeners and our clients and our folks that we work with regularly, this is one of the biggest challenges that they have with it. So I'm really happy that you took some time out of your busy schedule to join us today to do a chat with us, or to have a chat with us about how we can be using our investments to also enable us to be purchasing and the things that we need to be mindful of. So thanks so much, Darcy, for doing this with us today. And I know we're going to have it in the show notes that are going to be below for people to get in contact with you. And I'm sure you're going to be open to some questions and some thinking that's from some of our listeners. You're okay with that?
Absolutely. The big thing for me is I'm always here to help. And and even if it's a one-off question, I'm happy to answer it. And truly it is. It's not just about building wealth; it's about protecting wealth. And,
Absolutely.
So I appreciate you guys having me on here today.
No worries. Well, listeners, we are coming up to the holidays now, so don't forget there's a couple of things in our podcast today that you will be wanting to make sure you take care of in a timely fashion, especially with some of those ones that clock out at the end of the year. But if you do have any questions, just reach out to us, because we are here to help, and we'll definitely get you in touch with Darcy so that you can get all of your questions answered. So for all of you that are living your dream here in the Okanagan, have a great day and Merry Christmas.